And this is the Jungian view, especially if you read his work, Seven Sermons of the Dead, because God subsumes in himself all polarities. He is above good and evil. He is above truth and falsehood. And the farther you are along on this path, the less consequential those distinctions are to you. This filters down into the daily life.
Okay, the bottom line, because I want to come back to Terry here, the bottom line for you, though, was that spirit guide good or bad for you?
In the end, bad, although she seemed terrific at the time, and she gave me many wonderful
experiences. Let's come back to that story later. But the fact is, what I want to get to is that you don't deny the fact that many astrologers are using spirit guides. We got the literature full of them. But you aren't coming from that direction. Is that correct?
That's correct. Okay, well, first of all, I don't agree with it. The way that it's been defined here, that's not even the way I see it particularly as being practiced. I think a lot of times we see a clever twisting of words. But be that as it may, define it as you will, it's not something that I do. It's not something that I have the ability to do. For example, I don't channel any entities. I'm very dubious about, and I think I speak, for example, of Jeff Green, probably one of the single greatest astrologers today. He said, let's face it, probably 9 out of every 10 people that claim to be channeling entities, they're not channeling positive or negative entities. They're not channeling entities at all. They're just taking your money. Now, we're not saying that this is impossible. If I've never channeled an entity, how can I say whether it's possible or not if I've never had that personal experience?
I agree. I would like to have a guess from you as to why you think that so many astrologers are going that direction.
Well, first of all, I've been in astrology for about over 20 years. And during that 20 years' time, very few of those years has this particular concept been around. I think there are fads within astrology, just as there are fads within the sciences and fads within any place else in life. And I think recently, it's been there's been a channeling fad. And you've noticed it. You've seen all of a sudden everybody's channeling, but they weren't a couple of years ago. And it's not just in astrology. It's not just that astrology people. Probably most of the channelers have absolutely nothing to do with astrology. Astrology is probably too complicated and detailed for them to get into. So I think that probably a lot of them are not on the up and up. But I don't think, as a lot of your guests probably think here, that this is some sort of evil plot to take over the world, that they're channeling demonic spirits or something like that. I'm not even here to make that judgment. I think in most cases, this is probably just a case of somebody trying to perhaps separate you from your money. And I think we have to realize that goes on in every profession. These people have attacked particular astrologers that make some pretty bizarre claims rather than looking at the whole body of astrologers. I think we could do the same thing within Christianity. Has come up very much lately.
Let's do it. Dr. Weldon, you've written in your book, quote, astrology is a proven occult art. I only got a minute and a half, so condense it, okay? Astrology is a proven occult art by virtue of its many connections to numerous other forms of occultism. Astrology is a potential introduction to a much wider practice of occult activity. Prove it. What do you mean?
Well, I think first of all that historically there's a much deeper tie into Spiritism than has been suggested. Even Ptolemy stated, quote, "They only who are inspired by the deity or God can predict particulars." In 16th and 17th century England, astrologers claimed to get their knowledge from spirit guides. So I think that there is a much greater tie into Spiritism historically than has been suggested. But there are 6 or 7 different converging lines of evidence, all of which support the conclusion that astrology is an occult practice. It always has been. It's accepted historically. Many astrologers today accept the fact that it is an occult art. Most of the people I contacted at the AFA convention, which claims to offer astrology as a science, were into the occult. It developed psychic abilities, and 80% of the people I interviewed, they admitted this, and that they became psychic through astrology. There are any number of spirit-dictated books on astrology. Irene Diamond, who was one of my first instructor at the conference, had 3 books, she says, were dictated by her spirit guides on astrology. Alice Bailey, her spirit guide, the Tibetan, dictated esoteric astrology. Edgar Casey, trance medium, dictated 2,500 readings on astrology. It's important to remember that astrologers do not always admit the fact that they have spirit guides. I talked to several people at the conference who initially said no, and then later they said yes, they did have spirit guides when they were oppressed on the issue. All in all, astrology is an occult practice.
All right, Maxine, we're going to take a break. When I come back, I want to ask you a question about the president, your buddy, your vice president of the American Federation of Astrologers, and I want to read a quote from the president about her astrological views, and we'll talk about it when we come right back. Hi, we're back, and Maxie, I'd like to come and talk with you about Doris Chase Doan, who is the president of the American Federation of Astrologers, in her book, Astrology, 30 Years Research, and she talks about her view of astrology. Thus, the birth chart maps the thought cells and thought structures within the unconscious mind. Now, that's quite a statement. I want to know how she knows that the birth chart maps the thought cells and the thought structures within the unconscious mind of the newborn babe and the positions of the planets. Here's how the stars affect it now, the celestial bodies. The positions of the planets indicate their kind, the kind of thought cells, the intensity of the thought cells, and the general direction of their desires. Do you believe that kind of thing?
Well, first of all, you're asking me to comment on somebody else's book. You're asking me to comment on a book of Doris Chase Doan, who is probably one of the foremost astrologers in the country today from a scientific standpoint. You would have to ask...
I say something, if I can interrupt. I don't like to interrupt, but I took her class. To say that she is one of the foremost scientific astrologers, she has been a spiritist for about 35 years. The Church of Light, of which she has been a member, is an earthly organization that has been contacted by what they call the Brotherhood of Light, which is the spiritistic hierarchy that works through the earthly organization, the Church of Light. She has taught courses in this on at least a dozen different forms of the occult. I talked with her after her class called The Art of Transmutation. She said, quote, "The spirit's work through the organization," end quote, "is very important to the work of astrology." That is not scientific, that's occultic.
All right. I just wanted to know, was that your view too? I thought maybe as being the vice president, that's not your view astrologically?
Well, I'm not clear exactly what she's saying. And what I would say is that you would have to ask her exactly what she means.
Let me come back to you. What is the importance of the birth date as far as you're concerned?
As far as I'm concerned, when a baby is born, that chart represents God's plan for that child in this lifetime.
Why is it God's plan?
Because astrology is God's plan.
Who told you?
The Bible.
Where did the Bible tell you?
In Genesis.
Where?
In Genesis.
Where?
Excuse me one moment. It says it when, and of course you are the biblical scholar, so I'm going to be quoting from memory. But it's when God said that God created, put the sun and the moon in the heavens for signs.
Well, let me read it to you then, okay? Verse 14, chapter 1, God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good.
John, you know very well.
I want to hear what Maxine has to say. That was the verse she was quoting. Now, give me the interpretation.
I just did.
What is it?
I just said it to you.
Okay, tell me again, please.
What I said was that God put the planets in the heavens for signs. And as an astrologer, I read those signs.
John, you know very well that there are numerous biblical translations of that passage. You picked the particular Bible translation that you preferred, but
I picked the one that's a standard NIV interpretation.
Yeah, the standard NIV, but there are other Bibles.
NIV is the most scholarly, up-to-date, accurate translation of all the scholars right now in the market.
There are.
Oh, wait a second. Just a second. I want to ask a question. How do you know what he uses as a translation?
Because I'm familiar with that particular translation.
You are. And
Yes, I've
how many
read
translations have you checked on the Hebrew that say that? Or English?
Okay, well, first of all, he didn't check the Hebrew either, but
I think he did.
What
He's pretty
I'm-
good at